It's not going to be a happy ever after. Um, Part two is called The Rise of the Olympians. Uranus has now been defeated. So Kronos, in a way, picking up the promise that his mother gave him, is that if you engage in this act of vengeance and we're successful, you'll become ruler of the cosmos. Kronos is now the ruler of the cosmos. He'd seized power, he'd banished his father to Tartarus, and he'd established a second order of gods, the Titans. They were the new ruling force. Soon he was to become all-powerful, all-powerful. He used threats of violence towards his siblings. So instead of it being the Titans, it was the Titan. So he used fear and violence over his siblings and took total control over the cosmos. He trusted absolutely nobody, and he ruled by fear. Meanwhile, Gaia, his mother, his co-plotter, faded into the background. She was troubled by what she'd seen. I think she was shocked by seeing the consequences of acting on her violence, on her vengeance. And the sight of her lover, well, once lover, castrated and bloody, was shocking. And she sort of was so shocked she withdrew. In fact, she was speechless when she saw what had happened. Still, Kronos celebrated his new reign with a great feast, and he invites all Titans and divine beings to a great big feast and a great big party. But in truth, his real intentions were more to do with the bedroom. And he quickly turned his amorous attention to his sister, Rhea. She too longed for Kronos. So they were two people just intent on getting into each other and onto each other, etc. They became lovers. And in time, Rhea bore Kronos several children. The first child was Hestia, goddess of the hearth and the home, the embodiment of warmth and domesticity. You can imagine her as a nice country woman. Come on into my fire and we'll have a cup of tea and a few scones. That's Hestia. And Rhea was overjoyed, but not Kronos. He remembered the curse hurled at him by Uranus. As you have overthrown me, so shall your child overthrow you. And the prophecy echoed in his mind, and Kronos, haunted by fear, swallows Hestia whole. He eats his daughter. Anyway, the lovemaking continued, and indeed there were subsequent pregnancies. Some of the great characters of the Greek myth were born: Hades, Demeter, the great mother goddess, Poseidon, the god of the sea, Hera, who's Zeus's wife, were all born. And just after being born, they're swallowed by their father. He's terrified about the prophecy. Your children will overthrow you, and you will not be in power anymore. The prophecy echoes in his mind. Now, 5 children, 5 eatings, form of cannibalism. And though Rhea once adored Kronos, now that love curdles into hatred. She now hates Kronos for what he has done. She hates him, hate. And as she gets pregnant for a 6th time, She resolves, I am not going to lose this child. And she seeks help from Gaia. And she even seeks help from the banished Uranus. All three of them now share similar feelings about the all-powerful Kronos, the master of the universe, the all-powerful. And together they devise a cunning plan. They will trick Kronos. And Gaia tells Rhea of a magnetite stone that would serve as a stand-in for the newborn. The stone was just the right size and weight as the baby. And as the appropriate time, as she's coming up to her 9 months, comes close, she gets this stone and she makes all the noises of childbirth. She even mimics those of the newborn who's just been born. So she makes Kronos think that she has given birth. Now she, meanwhile, has wrapped the stone in swaddling clothes, and true to form, Kronos comes round looking for the newborn. And so Rhea gives him the bundle, and he, unsuspecting, not even interested enough to look at the child, who he thinks is the child, swallows the stone whole. Meanwhile, Rhea is still pregnant, and she heads off rapidly to Crete to give birth. She'd lined up a bit of support in Crete, and this is her 6th. And in time, she duly gives birth to her 6th child, who's called Zeus, the all-powerful. And she had recruited the wonderful goddess Metis to serve as a minder, as she would have to return to Greece and pay attention to her husband Kronos. And a healthy, bouncing baby is duly born, and this time, because of her trick, had avoided the cruel fate of the cannibalism of the frightened father. Now, Metis brought up Zeus well. He's brought up on goat's milk and manna. Do you remember that tree? Manna created a very strong young lad with sparkling eyes. And Metis taught him to judge other people's intentions, to pause before acting, to win loyalty through wisdom rather than through fear, to lead with balance, reason and imagination, and to lead through love, not fear, because we know how Kronos was leading. He frightened everyone. As Machiavelli says, as a leader, you can either be loved or feared. And Zeus was being brought up by Metis, who we know about earlier, and she was bringing him up to be a very different type of leader. And it was very clear right from the beginning that Zeus had leadership potential, which was going to be very different. So there was an interesting story told about the young man. One day he snapped off a goat's horn, and this immediately became a cornucopia, a source of endless source of nourishment and plenty. It echoes in Irish myth of Dagda's cauldron, the cauldron that never empties. And it was a symbol. One of the things we know in the myths is that when you have a good leader, the result is abundance. The rivers are full of fish and the crops are full and everything's abundant. So in a way, this was a symbol of abundance, indicating that he was going to be a good king. Now, Rhea and Zeus, mother and son, were not finished. They now prepare to confront Kronos. And Metis helps them brew a potion made from mustard seed, poppy juice, sulfur, and manna, masked in sweetness. Kronos, meanwhile, is miserable. He's plagued with a monumental stomachache. Obviously, internally, he's got a belly full of a stone churning in his gut. So when Rhea turns up, he's immediately willing to take the powerful potion. Now the effect was immediate. He vomits up Hestia, Hades, Demeter, Poseidon, and Hera. And so Zeus now had siblings by his side. By the way, Zeus, like many powerful young men, was also very lusty. He lusted after Metis, Metis, who you know brought him up. But Metis was not for moving. She wasn't going to have any of this from Zeus. So meanwhile, Zeus now has the siblings by his side, and Zeus and Kronos go to war. And this war was called the Titanomachy. It was the war between the Titans, led by Kronos, and Zeus. So what was domestic had now become a whole cosmic thing. And the Titans, violent and mighty, looked to have the upper hand. After all, they were absolutely enormously powerful and ruthless. And the thought was that they would have the upper hand on these new young gods. But Zeus had learnt a thing or two from Metis, and he arranged to get help. He freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires from Tartarus. So they who were dismissed and abandoned and sent off to Tartarus, he called them up and he gets them on his side. So now Zeus is willing to deal with the Titans, or at least the rejected Titans, and he promised them freedom. He's willing to free the abandoned ones. Now you can imagine having a Hecatoncheires on your side with their hundreds of arms, capable of throwing weapon after weapon. You've got a mighty fighter. And also other Titans joined him, Prometheus and Epimetheus, who you may know the term Prometheus, the ultimate rebel who takes on Zeus in later stories. So basically he forms a cohort around him, and he has obviously his own siblings. And this war was cataclysmic. It was the Titanomachy, as we've just said. It was a first great war. It was the cosmic war. The whole earth was involved. Earthquakes, fire, and storms. It wasn't just the people fighting. It was as if the whole natural world was at war too. Mountains trembled, skies shook, and in fact the whole earth was shaped by the conflict. Islands were formed. Meanwhile, and as I said before, one of the characteristics of these incredibly powerful men is they also feel that power includes sleeping with whoever they choose to sleep with. And Zeus was extremely amorous, extremely promiscuous, and fathered many new beings with many new partners. Now his wife was Hera, who we know about. She was the last of the ones that were eaten, and because they reversed the order, she was then the first, and he becomes his wife. And through them, they create the great craftsman god, Hephaestus, and they create the god of war, Ares. But Zeus has many dalliances. He feels he can sleep with anyone. And indeed, he does sleep with many Titan ladies. There's no problem sleeping with the enemy. And in fact, from his union come the Muses. And I'd suggest you look them up. They're just an absolutely wonderful description of many different types of creativity. I'm not going to go into it now, but the names are Calliope, Clio, Erato, Euterpe, Melpone, and also the Graces. You probably know the term the Graces. Aglia, Euphrosyne, Thalia, they bring beauty and joy. So these dalliances with Titan ladies very often create wonderful offspring. And indeed, he fathered the Horai, who are the seasons, and other deities tied to justice and law and peace and balance. But needless to say, his wife is not particularly pleased. And by the way, some of these offspring were of a different hue. Some of the time they gave birth to the Keres and the Gorgons. So in the end, Zeus triumphs. He wins the Titanomachy, and Kronos is defeated, and Atlas is condemned to hold up the sky. You probably know that story. And the Olympians take their place as rulers of the cosmos. And now we have a new order taking shape, where, in part because of the upbringing of Zeus, it's shaped not only by power, even though we've got power and promiscuity as the characteristic of the main man, but by wisdom and love. And this is the age of the Olympians. And we have these wonderful 12 gods, the 12 Olympian gods: Hera, Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, and Hermes. They are a wonderful collection of energies. And you can imagine if we have them working together, it is another era and another order. Now, what we also know is that Prometheus was intent on overthrowing. So we have this continual thing of getting set up and then overthrown. But let's step back for a minute. And what about Hera? You know, here is a long line of women who were treated badly. She was turned from a much revered and worshipped goddess in the pre-Homeric Greeks. They loved her. There were temples all over Greece for Hera. And now, as a result of Homer, she's become a shrill, bitter, jealous termagant, chasing the various women around who her husband was sleeping with. You do have to ask the questions: why did Hera chase the women around? Why didn't she chase her husband around and have a speak to him? So as we look back on this story, we have Gaia suffering the cruelty of Uranus. We have Rhea suffering a husband who's eating her children. And we have Hera, who is dealing with a philandering husband. And by the way, things are not going to change, because pretty shortly we're going to get into the Homeric stories. And we're going to have some of the most powerful and inspiring figures in the goddesses: Circe, Penelope, Helen, Athena. But we also have Helen of Troy. She, who's the face who launched 1,000 ships, kidnapped from her husband. We have Odysseus' Penelope, who Mary Beard picks as an illustration of being a victim of hardwired misogyny. But we're not here to deal with the Homeric epics, but just to point out what's down the road. What we've dealt with this evening is Gaia, Rhea, and Hera. So why don't we head into